I guess the second biggest appeal of coming here after just the natural acoustics of the live space is the mic cupboard. It's like incredible in both studios. You sort of never really run out of anything. Close mic wise, we were sort of alternating between using an old 70s D12 and a slightly more modern, well, much more modern Audix D6 on the kick. It's just got a real good sort of punchy, I guess slightly hyped attack to it. Slight bit of a weird kind of scooped EQ shape to it, but that sort of tends to be your friend with bass drums. And a Neumann FET 47, which always sounds good. Usually when you're recording a ported bass drum, I'll sort of put the D6 just inside the hole and the 47 just outside. As you can see, this bass drum is unholy, so it's back a bit. Snare top, we've got a Bayer 201 cunningly taped to an AKG 451. They sort of work really nice in conjunction together. 201 sort of gets a bit more of the kind of deep thumpiness, and the 451 gets a little bit more of the character. If the snare drum's a little bit ringier, it kind of tends to sort of capture that quite nicely. And then under, we've got a Sennheiser 441. It's a dynamic that sounds a bit like a condenser, sort of gets a lot of detail and has like a huge dynamic range. So that's particularly good for something like this where you're sampling and wanting as many variations of all the different articulations on the snare. Close mics on the toms are 421s, which we actually did try a few other things on this session, and the 421s won. And then close mics on the Hat and Ride are a pair of Neumann KM 184s that just always sound beautiful as cymbal spots, always use those. They're a little brighter than what I'm using for the overheads, so they kind of interact nicely. I love FET 47s, and they've got them coming out of their ears here, so they usually form quite a big part of my drum sound here. There's always one on the kick. I usually use them as overheads and sometimes as room mics as well. They just sound incredible. Slightly darker, slightly warmer than what people kind of tend to use on overheads. I always think they kind of get a good balance between the shells and the cymbals. This is quite an important one, actually. This is a M260, which is being quite severely compressed in the control room. Just gets a really nice sort of semi-ambient picture of the drums. Always position it back here because the drummer is sat here, so you're kind of getting a less direct signal from the hi-hat, and a really nice attacky sound from the snare and toms. Another thing I always do here is use a stereo Neumann called an SM2, which I just love. I kind of have it, I don't know, maybe 4 foot out in front of the drum kit. It just sort of captures, it's kind of like a cross between an overhead and a room mic-ish, the way I have it. I have it quite low in front of the kit, compress it a little bit so you sort of really get a sense of the space that you're in. I kind of refer to it as the mid-room, so it's kind of halfway between overheads and a room mic. Just gets a really nice image of the kit. I always have it quite low, and it's often the thing I'll listen to first. If that sounds pretty good, then you're in a good place to start adding in close mics and worrying about phase and things like that. This is another big part of some of the drum sounds we've been getting here. This is known as a ball and biscuit, which is a dynamic mic made by STC. That is just kind of quite, as you can see, quite close, like trying to get as much kick and snare as possible on it. That in the control room is going through a radial EXTC box, which allows me to route it through guitar effects pedals. So that's been going through, I've been chopping and changing a little bit. That's been going through fuzz pedals with maybe a bit of gate on them as well. So it's sort of getting a very, very distorted kind of sound. So this is a TLM 170. Got it about 3 meters out in front of the kit, quite heavily compressed. Just brings out a bit of character to this room, because as you can see, the part of the room we're in here is kind of quite dry, so you get a nice kind of barky room sound from this mic. And then let's have a look at the Coles. These are actually probably like the most extreme room mics, which are in a totally different acoustic space around the corner here, which you can hear is very live and sort of interesting sounding. And it's just a pair of stereo 4038s. There's a very weird resonance in this room, which I quite like. It sort of seems to accentuate certain things more than others. It sounds very nice. One of the cool, unique things about the coach house is that there's this long tiled corridor that runs up the side of the live rooms. It's great because you can kind of tailor how much gets to it. You can leave doors completely wide open to utilize it a lot, or have doors slightly ajar to sort of, you know, just to sort of limit what spills out into that room a bit. This corridor is very much a kind of signature sound of this studio. I usually have the door just behind you slightly ajar, and it just seems to, I don't know, the snare seems to kind of resonate out here a lot, and this just captures that in a really nice way. It almost sounds like it's kind of like a reverb that's being sent just from the snare, but it's not. It's just how this little hallway resonates. I've generally tried to kind of keep things as I would if I was making a record. So I haven't, you know, I've resisted the temptation to sort of go crazy and put up like tons of extra mics just for the sake of sampling, and that's been really fun, actually.